Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the second episode of our C programming language. In this episode, we're going to learn about variable and constants. Last episode, we learned about the basic syntax of C. Here, imagine you are a programmer and your client gives you a task of writing a program that is going to print something like what you're just seeing in the screen. So here the program reads, "Hello Hyperdev Farm. We are glad to welcome you to Hyperdev. Hyperdev is a platform that teaches you all that you need to know about coding. Hyperdev is 2 years old, but it is seeking to be older than 2 years soon. Will you support it to be more than 2 years? If yes, then subscribe to Hyperdev today." In this little, let me say, laughing emoji or something. That is actually what your client asks you to write. But after you finish writing the program, this is how it looks like. So you as a programmer, you are not happy with the program because this program involves a lot of repetition. From line 7 to line 13, we over repeat Hyperdev, 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 Hyperdev. So you are looking for a way. What will you do in order to make sure that you only change something once, then the entire Hyperdev, Hyperdev, Hyperdev will change? That is actually what you need. Because imagine you give that program to your client and your client say no. You know what? Instead of using this name Hyperdev, use something like Microsoft. And for you to use that, you're going to come to every part which is written Hyperdev, 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 and you're going to change every single bit of it. Imagine this is like 1,000 line of codes. It is going to be tedious and it's going to give you hard time in changing every single thing, And this in C programming, this is where variable comes to help now. Variable is like address given to a specific object, and that address can be changed, or that object can be changed or will vary from one way to another, and that address will refer to that object. So let us take it just simply like this. You have a box, and inside that box you have a content, and the content inside that box, you have written a name of that content beside the box, and that address beside the box represents what is inside that box. So that is exactly how variable is in C. So to help us with this situation, let's define a variable. We will now give Hyperdev as an object to that variable, or value to that variable that we are going to define. Then wherever that name Hyperdev is supposed to appear, we just pass the reference of that object, which is the variable we defined. So wherever the execution of our code reached to that part where it got the references to that specific variable, it will just execute that object. So let's put this in coding form. So let's say cha is the stand for characters in C. Actually here we are going to learn a little bit about data types, because here now what we are writing is under data types. We have char, float, double, int, and many other things. But we are going to cover data types in specific in next episode. In this episode, just bear with us. Whatever kind of thing we're going to go through, let's just handle it the way it is. And this is going to enlighten you about what you're going to learn in the next episode. Here we are going to say char because what we need is a name, Hyperdev, or whatever kind of name we're going to change to. So we are going to say name like that. So because we don't need only a single character, since char is stand for character, we need, let me say, a sequence of characters, which means many characters which form name, and it can like form many things. We are going to use a bracket like this. This bracket is going to illustrate for us that what we need is a sequence of characters, which is actually called a string in C. So here we are going to put double quotation, and this double quotation is because what we are writing is actually a string. So here we need to say Hyperdev. Then instead of using that name Hyperdev, Hyperdev, Hyperdev everywhere, let's just go to the specific places of Hyperdev, then change it with %s, which is stand for a string. Then in the end of the statement, we'll just put comma and say name Don't put the bracket there. Just say name, and that is all. So let's change it everywhere in our code. Let's do it all like that. So now all the parts which were written hyperdef, we have now changed it to %s, which is specifying the location where we need that specific thing to appear. Then the name, which is now going to pull that reference from up there to show that this is actually where in this line we need this thing to appear. So if we run our code, it is going to print pretty much the same thing as I read from the beginning. It says, hello Hyperdev fam, we are glad to welcome you to Hyperdev, and all the other stuff is going to render the same specific thing. The reason is because code in C is executed from top to bottom. This editor is executing whatever kind of code that we have put here with a reference to make sure it pulls every reference and places it. Instead of this, it is now going to appear this. Instead of the other one which is down here, it is going to appear the same. So every part of this where we put references, the objects are now placed in the place of these references, and that is how easy and how quick it works. So if we are to read it down here, we have still another problem, because here we have 2 years, here we have 2 years, and also we have 2 years somewhere, which is here. So we need a number which can be put in that place of 2 years, because who knows, maybe next year it will be 3 years, or the other year it will be 4 years. So you can use the same program again, or go to a specific place where 2 appears and try to change everything if it is like a bulk kind of program. So for us to do that, we just come up here and define the same variable. We define a variable, but this variable is going to be a little bit unique. The reason is because the variables there we're using is different. Char stands for characters, and it is only taking characters, which means from A, B to the end. Then if we put that bracket, then it will now take characters in sequence. But to take a sequence of characters, here it is only going to deal with characters, not numbers. That is why here in char, we can also say char down and we start putting the number which is for 2. It is not going to work. So here we are going to define int. We're going to use int keyword. Then after this, we're going to say, because that is actually the age. That is actually the age of the channel. So we are going to say age. Then that age will maybe say 2, because there actually we pass the value to be 2. So the value here, we are going to give the value 2. So come down here to wherever the age appears. Then instead of saying 2, we're going to say %d. Then go to the end here, put comma, then say age, which is referring to your variable up there. Then you come to this location where age appear. This is, where age appear %d, where age appeared. This is where sometimes some people will confuse, but here you just put comma and put age. If you have many things which need to be referred here, the only thing you can do is put comma and write it. Put comma and write it. How many there are, the code editor will understand everything, and it will execute it accordingly. So come down here to the last 2, then come and put %d. %d actually is only because we are dealing with integers. You can use %d or %i, but in specific, if you are dealing with any kind of data type, all it is letters of references are all there. All of these things we are going to cover in the next episode after this one. Here, let's just say age as usual. Now our program is just as it was before. There's no problem. If you are to run this program, it is going to print for you the same thing. But the good thing about this though is that now you are going to change it from here. If I change this to be 3, then which means everything in this code where the age is involved is going to change to 3. If I change it to 4, the same thing will happen. If I change it to 5, the same thing will happen. The thing is, because now you have one reference of object or address of a specific object, of which if you change the value, then the entire value of a program changes. And that is more easy, because now wherever that reference appears, everything will just change it at one. If it is 1,000 or 1 million line of code, you don't need to kill yourself with going to a specific line of code and change that thing manually. And that is how quick and how easy it is. So let's come to depth of it to understand why it is called variable. Variable. In specific, here we have this line 11. In line 11 here, we printed the age. Okay, we printed the age here. And the age here is actually going to refer to this age that we put 2 here. So let's say age again. That the same age up there. Then let's define for it another value, like maybe 5. Let's say 5. Then if we run this code, you are going to see that from that line 11 of which I told you, the hyperdev is 2 years old. Okay, is 2 years old. But now the other line down, let's put a new line. Here there's no new line, sorry for this. Here there's no new line, let's put a new line. Oh, yeah, let's put a new line here, like that. Okay, then one thing you're going to notice, immediately after this 2 years old, this is where I reassign another value for this specific age. This is where I reassign, and I reassign the value to be 5, and all the ages after line 11 changed from 2 to 5. And that is why it is called variable. Variable simply means it can change. It can vary from one to another. It is not something which is constant. And this brings us to another phase which is constant. And constant in C can be defined in 2 ways. The first way is you will say const, like that. Imagine if we need to change this age to be constant, then we'll say age, like that. Then we'll say the value is 2. But something with constant though, we don't need to redefine constant, or we don't need to reassign a value for constant. The reason is because here, if we have this value 2, okay, if we run this program like this, it is going to give us error. The reason is because this age, the value of this age is also reassigned again here. And that is why here in the error, if you can read down here, it says assignment of read only variable age. This variable, if it is with const, you don't need to assign anything. The only thing you do is just a read only kind of variable. So that's why here, if we take this thing away and run it again, it will actually execute with no problem. It will execute with no problem and everything will work. It is 2, 2, 2, 2 up to down. With constant, you don't need to assign another value for a constant. If I say constant name this, and I reassign also like that name to another thing, then the code will yell at me. The reason is because constant cannot be changed. You can't change the value of that address. And there's some address in real life which can't be changed. Think about things like human. Human remain human. There's nothing changing about that. No one will ever call you animal because that address is a constant address. Animal is an animal. Tree is a tree. It's known as a tree. No one will ever change that to another thing else because that is a constant kind of address assigned to that specific kind of things which look like that. So another way of defining constant is through using, let me say, define keyword. And this is mostly loved in C. You can say define like that. Then you are not going to say equal sign, nor will you give a data type. It will be determined with the value you give. Because here, if we put it like this and we say number, like that, right? Then that number, maybe we say 8, like that. You can notice there's no equal sign, there's nothing. You can't compare it with things that we use down here. The definition of constant and variable down here is quite different compared to that one up. And here, the good thing is here in the other one where you are using const keyword, you can say int for integer, float for float values. Then you will have characters, you will have many other things. This one, you don't need those things. You just say define number 8, then it knows this thing is integer. Then comes down here in every part where you put number or where the integer appears, just change that thing to number. Just change that thing to number and run the code. And you will see that here it changed to 8. And the major reason behind this is because now it is using a direct value from up there, the defined value up there. So in this code, if you use this same address, which is number, and try to change that value to something, then you try to run the code, it won't work. The reason is because it says like one value require as left operand of assignment. Here is only one value which is going to be required. There's nothing like you need this or you need that. Nah, there's nothing like that. Even though here you said like maybe you said int like that, like if you are trying to define a variable or something of that kind, if you try to run it, it won't work. The reason is because it now count this upper whatever it says before the numeric constant, which means this thing is constant. You can't like define it again and you can't use something here if you want to use it unless you use identifiers and things like this. But this is to show you that constant in C cannot be redefined. There are things that you will use it like that, like a value of pi, like a value of a specific mathematical expression, or maybe a name of something that you really don't need it to change across your code. So with this, we have come to the end of this episode, and in the next episode we're going to learn about the data type, of which some part of it you have seen here, like char, int, and many others are coming. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Peace.